My 19th birthday fell on the same day as my father's memorial. I used to think that kind of coincidence only happened in bad movies, but there I was, staring at my reflection in the car window, trying to convince myself it didn't hurt. My father always said timing was everything. Maybe that's why it stung so much, because this timing said more than words ever could. There was no invitation, no call, not even a forwarded email. Just a post I stumbled upon online, in loving memory of Horatio Marrow, hosted by the Odessa Foundation. My sister's name was right there, bold and polished. Mine was nowhere. Still, I found myself driving toward the hotel anyway. The Pacific light faded behind me, painting the buildings gold as I turned onto the street where people like my father used to belong. I parked across from the entrance, watching black cars pull up one by one. Men in suits stepped out with the confidence of people who never had to ask if they were welcome. I wasn't sure what I expected, maybe some small gesture of acknowledgement. But I knew better. Being forgotten, I whispered, has always been our family's tradition. I reached into my purse, feeling the weight of the phone he left me, his personal one, locked since the day he died. It had been sitting in a drawer for months. Tonight, I brought it like a shield. My only inheritance. The screen caught the city light for a second, blank, unreadable. You can't choose your family, I said softly, but you can choose the truth you live with. Inside the hotel, everything smelled expensive: roses, champagne, polished marble. The staff moved with that well-trained calm that only luxury can buy. A woman at the reception smiled as I approached. Name, please? Selena Marrow. Her finger traced the list on her tablet. Then again. Her face shifted just slightly, but I caught it, that professional hesitation. I'm sorry, miss, but your name doesn't seem to be on the list. Maybe under my father's name, I said, keeping my voice level. Horatio Marrow. Another pause. Another scroll. This event is for family and board members only. I smiled, though it felt wrong on my face. I am family. The people behind me shuffled, impatient. Someone whispered something like awkward. I straightened my shoulders, pretending I didn't hear. Try checking again, I said, though I already knew how the scene ended. I'm very sorry, she repeated, a little firmer. A cousin, second or third, I could never keep track, passed by, eyes darting away as if I carried something contagious. That tiny act of avoidance hurt more than the rejection itself. I forced a small laugh. It's fine, I said. I'm used to being invisible. I turned to leave, pretending I had somewhere better to be, when a young waiter stepped out from behind the hallway. Miss Marrow? His tone was quiet, respectful in a way that startled me. Come this way, please. He led me through a side entrance, past trays of wine glasses and the smell of roasted duck. When he opened the service door into the ballroom, the sound hit me first: soft jazz, distant laughter, the steady hum of money at ease. You can stay here, he said, nodding toward a small table near the kitchen doors. If anyone asks, you didn't come through me. Thank you, I said, meaning it. The table wobbled slightly, and my chair faced the wrong direction, half toward the restroom, half toward the stage where Odessa stood, surrounded by people who looked at her like she'd inherited his soul along with his company. The stage lights made her glow. The corner I sat in was dim. Even the lighting didn't want to find me, I murmured. I checked my phone. No messages. No missed calls. Just a reminder from the calendar app: happy birthday, Selena. The irony almost made me laugh. The clinking of glasses blended into background noise as I drifted into memory. I could still see Dad at his old desk, sleeves rolled up, tapping his pen against a stack of papers. Legacy isn't about who gets the keys, he'd tell me. It's about who remembers the doors. Back then, I believed him. I stayed up late helping him with charity drafts, spreadsheets, speeches he'd later give word for word. Odessa never showed interest, not until the company became something worth owning. When the applause started, I snapped back to the present. Odessa was at the microphone now, elegant as ever. "Thank you all for continuing Dad's dream," she said, smiling toward the board members. Her voice filled the room with practiced warmth. He believed in people who shared his vision of giving back. Not one word about me. Not one glance my way. I clapped anyway, softly. "Guess I wasn't part of the dream," I said under my breath. Around me, people nodded, toasted, carried on. The ache settled deeper, the kind that doesn't make you cry, it just hollows you out. But I refused to let that show. Dignity is sometimes the only power left to people who've been erased. As the speeches ended, I reached for my purse again. The phone was still there, heavier somehow. "He left her an empire," I said quietly, "and me a password I can't crack." Then the screen lit up. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even moved. A single notification glowed across the black glass. "To my daughter, open when you're ready." I froze, staring at the words like they might vanish. My heart beat once, hard, and the noise of the ballroom faded into something distant, muffled. I looked around, nobody noticed. Nobody ever did. For the first time that night, I wasn't invisible. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to be seen. When I finally closed the door behind me, the weight of everything I didn't say at that memorial hit me like a punch to the ribs. My apartment was dim, still holding the scent of the lavender candle I'd lit before I left. I kicked off my heels, and the echo of them thudding on the hardwood felt louder than the applause Odessa got during her speech. The cake was still there, white frosting, gold candles. Unlit. Untouched. I sat down at the kitchen counter and stared at it for a minute. The only wish I would have made? To not feel this forgotten. When people leave you out long enough, you stop knocking. You start listening for signs instead. That's how I lived my life around Odessa. My sister knew how to smile for the cameras and whisper daggers behind closed doors. We hadn't spoken in over a year before Dad passed, and not once since. I reached into my purse and pulled out the phone. His phone. Cold, silent. A 4-digit code stood between me and the truth, or whatever scraps were left of it. I tried his birthday. Mine. The year Odessa made partner. Nothing. Then it hit me, our last fishing trip. Just me and him out on Lake Berryessa. I punched in 0617. The screen blinked. Then opened. One video. No apps. No contacts. Just one thumbnail with Dad's face, looking right at me. I hit play. If you're watching this, they've already erased you. Don't let them. I hadn't heard his voice in months. Not the soft, tired one from his hospital bed. This voice was clear. Direct. Urgent. "Selena, listen to me. This company, our family, isn't what it looks like. Odessa made sure of that. If I'm gone, it means she won. But not all the way. There are things in here that prove what really happened. Use them. Carefully." The video cut off. I sat in silence, barely blinking. My pulse thudded in my neck. I tapped the folder that appeared next, Inheritance, Real Story. Inside were scanned contracts, old emails, board memos, recordings. I skimmed through them, heart racing. Then one file made me stop. od_lawyer_private.m4a. I pressed play. He needs to change it now, Odessa said. Her voice, calm as ever. If he doesn't, I'll make sure the board knows about Denver. About what he did. A pause. The lawyer, Odessa, that would ruin him. He had a choice. This is mine. Then Dad's voice, quiet. Selena's not ready. Odessa snapped, she's not an heir. She's a liability. The audio clicked off. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone. I just stared at the wall. Not betrayal. Premeditated burial. And I helped shovel the dirt, didn't I? All those times I stayed silent. All those times I let Odessa talk over me, talk through me. The night he collapsed, I remembered now. Odessa was outside the hospital room with the lawyer while I sat inside, holding his hand. I thought she was getting updates. She was updating the will. I stood up. Grabbed my laptop. Plugged in a USB. I backed up everything. Every file, every memo, every lie. Then I opened my notebook and started writing. Names. Questions. Connections. Odessa. The lawyer. The board. But one name I circled twice, Aunt Marlene. Always in the background. Always listening. Never speaking. But never absent. I threw a few things into a bag. Slipped the USB into my bra. I looked at my reflection in the microwave door. Tired, but not broken. Odessa had the empire. I had the evidence. Let's see who lasts longer. The drive over the Bay Bridge felt longer than it should have. Fog rolled in from the water, swallowing streetlights and making the world outside the windshield seem uncertain. Sitting in traffic, I looked at the corner of my purse, the USB tucked inside, the phone still locked, and I realized that I was chasing answers nobody wanted me to have. I pulled into Alameda around mid-morning, the fog lifting just a little, like the world couldn't decide whether to hide or reveal what was coming. I parked in front of my aunt's old Victorian house. Marlene opened the door before I finished knocking. Her face was gentle, still lined from years of watching other people's storms. She said, "I figured you'd come eventually." There wasn't surprise, only the calm expectation of someone who had seen too much. I stepped inside and something in the air made me steady. Maybe it was the carpet, or maybe it was the quiet knowing in her eyes. She poured tea, the kind that smelled like something meaningful but hard to name. We sat at her kitchen table. The kettle's whistle was the only thing louder than my hesitation. I asked softly, "Do you believe Dad changed that will willingly?" Marlene didn't answer. Instead she said, "You were always brave, for a young woman. Your mother used to say that, you know." A pause. Legacy isn't just money. It's what you refuse to let go. I nodded, letting her words settle. Then she said, "Your father told me once, truth is like tea, if you rush it, it turns bitter." She watched me closely as she took a sip. I understood that this moment was more about waiting than speaking. After a while, Marlene stood. She retrieved a leather-bound journal from a locked drawer. She handed it over with a faint smile. "He gave this to me a week before he passed," she said. "Told me to keep it until you were ready." I opened it, pages brittle, handwriting familiar. Entries about dinner table arguments, brokered deals, the way Odessa smiled when Dad looked away. One phrase hit me, "If you're reading this, you need to find the copy Marlene didn't know I hid." My stomach twisted. Hidden recording. Something Odessa didn't know existed. My breath stuttered. I touched the words like they might burn. Marlene reached into the back of the journal and pulled out a sealed envelope marked my youngest. I stared at it. Why didn't you tell me any of this earlier? I asked, voice low. The calm broke just a little. She exhaled. Because I didn't know if you'd be strong enough to act on it. Now, I think you are. Her voice was steady, and for the first time I saw that strength in her, not just in her quiet presence, but in her decision to trust me. I opened the envelope slowly. Dad's handwriting, not an apology, but an explanation. I feared her not for what she would lose, but for what she would take. The words echoed. I closed my eyes. Fight wisely, he said. I swallowed. Then I nodded because I knew I would. I walked out of her house clutching the journal and the envelope. The fog was gone now. A clear sky stretched ahead. The car radio came on with an old Bruce Springsteen track, one my father played on his Sunday mornings. For a moment I let the beat ground me. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I set my seatbelt and exhaled slowly. The weight in my hand felt lighter than it did in my head. I whispered, she took his empire. I got his last words. The engine roared to life and I drove away, not counting the miles, just feeling the road steady beneath me for once. Because I believed something I hadn't believed in before, that memory wasn't weakness. It was power. The only thing more dangerous than a lie is the person who remembers the truth. I walked in like I belonged. Or at least I looked like I could belong. The lobby of Nova Vita Bio Group was all glass and steel, polished floors that made your shoes echo, portraits in bronze of my father and Odessa smiling side by side. My badge read Visitor, Marrow. Visitor. The founder's daughter. That irony hit harder than any stare. I approached the boardroom door with his name above it. I paused and remembered what Dad once told me, trust is not inherited, it's earned. Every footstep toward that door felt like asking, did I ever get the chance? Inside, Odessa stood at the head of the table, arrayed with executives who nodded at her like she'd solved the world's problems. I sat quietly at the back row, cast in the role of silent guest. Gideon Rook, the CFO, had arranged for me to attend, but not participate. The chair felt stiff, the table icy beneath my fingers. Around us, conversation hummed with earnings forecasts and expansion plans. I kept my face steady. Under the calm, though, the tension felt like fine china ready to break. Odessa raised her glass and welcomed everyone to celebrate the new era. To my father's legacy, she said, and to those who stepped up when he stepped away. The word he hung in the air, waited. My summer in the warehouse, the nights I spent drafting spreadsheets for Dad, none of it was referenced. My team in Seattle was being optimized, which meant fired, and Gideon slid a brief across the table to me. I glanced at the numbers. My division shrinking. My people leaving. Inside, I thought, your legacy runs on people you didn't see. Mine ran on those you ignore. Someone tapped my shoulder, photographer in 5 minutes. My heart jumped. I touched my bag to feel the locked phone inside. Just a bag, I told myself. No one else needed to know the truth behind the cold glass. After the session, I stayed behind purposely, hovered near the hallway. The marble floor swallowed sound, but the whispers followed me. 2 executives talked low. Odessa's really the one Dad trusted by the end that last contract? He signed it under pressure. The phrasing made my stomach drop. These weren't whispers meant for me, yet they spilled out. I pulled the phone from my bag. The screen glowed faintly in the shadowy corridor. I recalled the journal Aunt Marlene had given me. He feared she knew too much. Just then the phone vibrated quietly. A notification, look up 7 Alpha Crown 1960. My pulse spiked. I touched the screen. My brain raced. What was 7 Alpha Crown 1960? The number felt like a code, the title like a betrayal. My jaw set. The corridors of power felt smaller now, like a cage built of glass and whispers. That evening I followed the invite to the penthouse overlooking the bay, Odessa and Gideon hosting the board's families. My name wasn't listed. I stood by the elevator watching guests ride up in pairs while I turned and stepped into the crisp air on the roof terrace. Fog brushed the glass railing. I let the breeze fill my lungs. If they kept the invitation out of sight, I kept the right to look. I pulled the phone out. Entered the code from the notification, access granted. The world felt suddenly calm and heavy both. I slipped the device back into my bag. I didn't ride the elevator. I walked home under streetlights, the city humming quietly. My reflection in passing windows said what I didn't have to. I was done being sidelined. Late that night I connected the phone to my laptop. The folder from earlier blinked, Foundation Drop 47, Sublevel 3. I whispered, Dad didn't leave me a phone to be invisible. He left me proof to be seen. I exported the data, encrypted every file, backed up the hidden recordings I'd discovered. I traced names. I circled persons, Odessa, Gideon, members of the board. Then I stopped at one name, Aunt Marlene. Quiet, overlooked, present at every meeting. I packed a small bag, slipped the USB into my bra, and sat for a moment in the dark, letting the screen glow on my face. Tomorrow, I would walk into the lion's den with its claws exposed. Walking into Quentin Vale's office felt like stepping into a time capsule. The wooden paneling and hallway rug looked exactly the same as when I was 12, sitting in that very lobby while Dad talked business. I opened the door and found Quentin behind the desk, older, yes, but still sharp. He smiled faintly. Your father was a man who understood time. Not always truth. That line landed hard. I sat across from him, clutching the phone and USB, the weight of what I'd uncovered gathering in my hands. I realized this wasn't just about money. It was about history, memory, and what happens when someone erases both. He opened a cabinet labeled Estate, Special, or Romero and pulled out a stack of documents. My heart sank. Hidden beneath the official will was a sealed addendum, a document Dad created weeks before he died but never filed. Quentin leaned forward, voice quiet. I warned him the family would fracture beyond mending if this went ahead. My mind raced as I scanned the pages. My name was listed, royalties, creative patents, board votes. Everything I should have had. Yet there it was, Odessa's name, bold, mine, faint. She insisted on correcting the future, Quentin said. I swallowed hard. Just when you think you know your enemy, you find out they were planning your exit. Reading the unsent will aloud, I felt something shift. The claim was clear, the intention was equal split, not this takeover happening now. I closed my eyes for a moment. My sister took Dad's dream and repackaged it. She didn't just steal legacy, she rewrote the script. Quentin looked at me and said quietly, if you want to contest it, this isn't just about property, it's about intent. And proving it. Intent. That word settled in me. The phone. The journal. The addendum. They were pieces of the same puzzle, unfinished, waiting for the right hand to place them. Dad thought he had time. They didn't give him that luxury. We moved fast. Quentin and I mapped out assets, the hidden video evidence, the journal Marlene gave me, the unfiled will, the witnesses. He explained the legal strategy, an emergency probate review based on coercion and misrepresentation. I listened, every clause embedding itself in my mind like ammunition. I realized I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was preparing. Quentin warned, "You won't just lose money if this fails. You'll lose every bridge you have left." I looked him in the eye and replied, "They burned the bridge. I'm building the court." The words tasted sharp but clear. No longer silent. No longer invisible. As I reached for my bag to leave, Quentin handed me a small envelope marked Personal, RM. My breath caught. Inside was a thumb drive. "Your father gave this to me the morning of his funeral. Said you'd know when to look." We plugged it in and watched footage, Odessa, in a stairwell, speaking in hushed tones, "It's done. He won't resist anymore." He signed even if he didn't mean it. My heart halted. The pen was his. But the pressure? That was all hers. I gathered my things and left the office quietly. The autumn air outside was sharp, it felt like a beginning. I stepped out of the driver's door and paused by the front porch of what used to feel like home. But the locks were new. The cameras blinking in the shrubbery, the uniformed staff I didn't recognize, all that told me one thing: this place was no longer mine. I walked through the dinner gathering at the Marrow residence anyway. I wore a tailored blazer and heels that click-clacked like an alarm. I told myself, this used to be my home. I'm just walking through what's left of it. The chandeliers hung lower, the paintings brighter, and the atmosphere rigid, waiting. I entered Odessa's fortress. At the table, Odessa presided like she'd always been meant to sit there. Conversations floated about preserving legacy and moving forward, while my summer in the warehouse, the nights I gave hours, were swept aside. I stayed calm. She raised a glass and said, "Some people inherit titles. Others inherit drama." Her smile polite. Her intent sharp. I breathed in the scent of roasted vegetables and old money. I leaned in. Quietly, only the guilty are allergic to the truth. She held her smile, but I saw the flicker. While she droned on about coherence and civility, I recalled all the times I'd been the quiet one, the ignored one. I wasn't quiet any longer. Dinner ended and the room thinned. I moved toward the corridor, stopping to listen. Two executives whispered, "He trusted her. Always did. That last contract, he signed under duress." I walked past them. No greeting. My phone in my bag vibrated with that code-triggered message I'd found. Inside, I pulled the journal printout. I held the frame of the addendum in my hand and set it on the table. I cleared my throat. This says I was part of the plan too. Odessa's hand hovered over her wine glass, the stem trembled. "You can call it fake, in court. Or, I can show the footage." I didn't raise my voice. But the silence that followed felt like a gavel. The servers paused. Guests shifted. The mask slipped. She turned her gaze to me, eyes narrowed. "You're emotionally unstable," she said. "Grief warps perception." I stood. Grief teaches you to be quiet. But silence is no longer my strategy. My chair scraped. I stepped back. "Keep pushing, and I'll make this entire house listen." A servant behind her looked at me. I saw shards of doubt flicker in Odessa's expression. I turned away and left the table. This time, I'm not the one who'll stay silent. You are. Later that night I found the letter at the bank, my name removed as emergency contact. Retroactive, they said. The move screamed war. I returned to my storage unit, retrieved the backup drive and the notes Dad had penned in his last weeks. I rang Quentin. My voice flat, "It's war now. No more decency. No more diplomacy." The streetlights blurred as I drove. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked someone ready. I whispered, "When they silence you, you learn to speak in actions. Mine starts tomorrow." I drove into Charleston just after 4, the afternoon light slipping away like a promise I once believed in. The familiar mahogany floors greeted me with a hollow creak as I stepped into the old house, the house Dad built, the house where I still slept through summer storms as a kid. The mantel held the picture of us when I was 8, Dad's arm around me, his smile patient, mine wide-eyed. The glass was cracked. I ran a fingertip along the fracture and my chest tightened. Home isn't where you're loved. It's where you're remembered. And I wasn't. I entered the study and saw the safe Dad had shown me once, telling me it held his most honest truths. Now I stood before it, quiet, resolved. I knelt at the safe and entered the code I'd uncovered. The door swung open to reveal the leather journal. I removed it gently and cracked it open at Dad's handwriting. Entry after entry, his misgivings about Odessa's ambition, his worry that the empire was shifting into something unrecognizable, the personal toll of silence. One line caught me: "I gave her structure. She gave me silence. How do you value that?" I closed my eyes and swallowed. I placed the journal on his old desk, inhaling the scent of aged paper and regret. For the first time I felt connected to the man he really was, beyond boardrooms and pictures. Then I found the folder labeled Project Phoenix, internal. The screen displayed the charity initiative Dad had funded, the one I worked on, the one Odessa later claimed. I remembered standing in the warehouse, presenting the idea to Dad while Odessa applauded later for the credit. I whispered, "Recognition isn't the reward. It's the acknowledgement that you existed." I copied the file onto the thumb drive with slow precision. Rage didn't rise like a storm. It settled like a bone-deep calm. Because I knew I was right. I phoned Quentin Vale from the study phone. He arrived within the hour. The old grandfather clock ticked persistently as he examined the journal and the files. "Your father didn't just build a company," he said quietly, "he built the Marrow Future Trust so that your vision mattered outside the walls they would build." The walls felt smaller then. "You're walking in with a flame," Quentin warned. "Make sure you know what you'll burn, and what will burn you." I nodded. I squared my shoulders. I was no longer lost in the echoes of his silence. I packed the journal and the drive into my bag. I left the house just as dusk fell, driving across the marshes with reeds whispering against the glass. I listed names in my head: Marlene, Keziah, the warehouse foreman who moved on quietly. I told myself, I am not just the daughter the empire forgot. I'm the one setting its alarm. They think I'm coming back to beg. Soon they'll find I came to rewrite the ending. I walked into the courthouse with my heels echoing on the tile floor, louder than the doubts I carried. Quentin Vale sat beside my attorney behind the plaintiff's table, his expression calm but alert. Across the room, Odessa Marrow sat at the defense table, her chin high, her lips unmoving. She dressed for war, so did I. I stood before the judge and greeted him respectfully, remembering Dad's words, "Make them listen without raising your voice." The press benches buzzed in the background. This case wasn't just family matter anymore, it was public. I straightened my back, inhaled steadily, and reminded myself, I'm not here to beg. I'm here to claim what was mine. When the defense attorney called my claim emotional speculation, I waited. I introduced Dad's handwritten journal, timestamps, scanned copies, forensic verification all laid bare. The judge faltered, then allowed it. I read aloud one entry: "One daughter respects what I built." The other sees it as her throne. Gasps stirred through the gallery. Odessa objected. The judge overruled. The air shifted. I felt something change. Push aside, daughter, no more. I collected strength in the quiet. The courtroom leaned forward. Then I delivered the evidence of hidden transfers, wire records showing funds moved into the Marrow Future Trust, quietly named under another entity. Odessa had authorized its closure after Dad died without consent. Even her lawyer looked surprised. I stood tall and said, she inherited the money. I inherited the receipts. Silence spread across the room. Suddenly, the power didn't lie with polished titles. It sat with the truth. I called 2 key witnesses. Marlene, the assistant and nurse, confirmed Dad was lucid when those entries were written. Keziah, the foreman, testified Odessa ordered deletion of the Phoenix Project records I discovered. Quentin showed archived emails that tied it all together. The judge nodded. The weight of the truth settled in the courtroom like dusk in a silent town. The gap between what they believed happened and what really did became clear. When the judge declared the hearing adjourned and no final verdict yet, I kept my seat. Odessa stormed out. Her lawyer offered evasive sound bites. I remained calm. A reporter asked, "Do you feel any closer to justice now?" I glanced at Dad's photo in my mind and said, "Closer to him." Out in the sunlight, I felt the shift. The courtroom didn't erase bloodlines but exposed them. The next move wouldn't be mine, it would be hers. It had been 6 months since the courtroom. Since I looked Odessa in the eyes and watched her blink for the first time in years. Now I was back inside the study my father once called his war room. But this time, it wasn't a battlefield. The dust had settled. The sunlight stretched longer through the windows. Everything was still except my chest. The phone, fully restored, sat beside his leather-bound ledger. Quentin had rebuilt the company's foundation with quiet discipline. But he never touched this room, he knew better. On the far wall hung a framed blueprint labeled Phoenix. For years, I thought it was just one of Dad's charity projects. Turns out, it was me. The margins weren't business numbers. They were dates. All connected to moments in my life. He'd been building a future. Through me. I opened the journal one last time and read his final entries. He didn't spare himself. He questioned letting the empire become a kingdom. He admitted his blindness to Odessa's ambitions, to the weight I carried alone. And then, there was a voice memo. I pressed play. If you're hearing this, it means I didn't fix it in time. But I know you will. That voice, it cracked at the end. It wasn't a man passing down power, it was a father asking for forgiveness without saying the words. I sat with it. Let it hit. Let it hollow me. Then I played it again, not for proof. For peace. Behind the bookshelf, I noticed an envelope tucked between forgotten manuals. My initials. Nothing else. Inside was a letter, handwritten, dated 3 months before my mother disappeared. Her script wavered, but her words were sharp. She spoke of growing apart from Dad. Of the way Odessa manipulated every crack in their marriage. And then, the last line, you were the glue. Still are. For the first time in years, my hands trembled not from grief. From truth. I called Marlene and Quentin over. We sat around the old desk like it was a kitchen table. We didn't argue over assets. We mapped out something better. Half of the company's remaining wealth would go into rebuilding schools in rural Georgia, a dream my mother once scribbled on a napkin. Odessa never called back. I stopped waiting. I walked the hallway where echoes once followed me. This time, there were none. I paused. No ghosts. No shadows. Just me. Whole. Empires aren't always built from glass and concrete, I said to myself. Sometimes, they're built from choosing differently. A week later, I stood at a youth conference. Not as an heir. Not as a survivor. Just a woman who knew too well the weight of being quiet too long. I shared pieces of the story. Not the names, just the lessons. A girl in the front row asked, "How did you know what to do?" I smiled, steady. I didn't. I just refused to stay silent. Back home, I placed the phone inside a glass case beside Dad's old watch. Beneath it, a plaque read, "For the silence that saved me. And the noise that built me." But just as I stepped away, a message lit up the screen, from an unknown number. One line, "You thought it was over." I didn't flinch.